Hey everyone, welcome. Today we are diving into a book that I'm telling you will completely change how you think about money. It's called The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. And the core idea is this: when it comes to your finances, how you behave is so much more important than how smart you are. Let's get into it. So, let's kick things off with a story that honestly feels more like a riddle. It's about two men, two completely different fortunes, and two outcomes that just don't seem to make any sense. But they get right to the heart of what this whole book is about. Here's the puzzle that sets the stage. How on earth did a regular guy, a janitor who spent his days sweeping floors, manage to die with an $8 million fortune that absolutely no one knew he had? Okay, this is where it gets really interesting. On one side, you've got Ronald Reed, janitor, high school education, super frugal. On the other side, Richard Fuscone, a top finance executive at Merrill Lynch, Harvard MBA, the whole nine yards. So who ended up the multimillionaire? The janitor. And the finance exec? He went bankrupt. How is that even possible? Let's take a closer look at Ronald Reed. His life was the definition of simple. He worked with his hands, fixing cars and sweeping floors. He lived his entire life in a small house he bought for 12 grand. His big hobby? Chopping firewood. So what was his secret? Well, he saved what little he could, put it into solid blue chip stocks, and then he just waited for decades. And the result of all that incredible, quiet patience? A cool $8 million. When he passed away, this unassuming janitor left millions to his local hospital and library, completely shocking a town that had absolutely no idea they were living next to a secret millionaire. Now let's flip the coin and look at Richard Fuscone. This guy had everything on paper you'd think would guarantee success. The Harvard MBA, the high-flying job. He lived in this massive mansion that cost over $90,000 a month, not to own, just to maintain. The problem was he leveraged himself to the hilt, borrowing huge amounts of money to fund it all. And when the 2008 financial crisis hit, poof, it all vanished. So what gives? What explains this massive, unbelievable gap between the janitor and the executive? It wasn't about brains or education or having some secret information. Nope, the answer is just one word: behavior. And getting your head around this is the single most important idea in this entire explainer. This quote from the book says it all. Doing well with money has a little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. See, Ronald Reed's behavior was defined by patience and humility. Richard Fuscone, despite all his knowledge, was driven by grade and ego, which made him take on way too much risk. Housel makes this brilliant point that we teach finance like it's physics, with concrete rules and formulas. But in reality, it's way more like psychology. It's all about our emotions and our weird behaviors. Think about it. You'd never, ever see a janitor perform a better surgeon than a Harvard-trained surgeon, right? But in the world of investing, it can happen. And as we just saw, it does. Okay, so if behavior is king, that brings up a really big question. Why are all of our behaviors with money so wildly different? To understand that, we need to dig into one of the book's most mind-bending concepts about how we see the world. It's this idea called the no one's crazy principle, and it basically says this: what you've personally experienced with money is a teeny tiny sliver of financial history, but it makes up something like 80% of how you think the entire financial world works. What you've lived through is way more powerful than anything you'll ever read in a book. Let me show you what I mean. If you were born in 1950, this is what the stock market looked like when you were coming of age. Between your teens and your late 20s, the market, after you account for inflation, went absolutely nowhere. So what did your personal experience teach you? It taught you that stocks are a sucker's bet. But if you were born just 20 years later in 1970, your reality was the complete opposite. You watched the market go up nearly 10 times during those exact same formative years. Your experience taught you that stocks are an incredible engine for building wealth. And this is the whole point. You can have two perfectly smart, reasonable people with totally opposite views on money. And guess what? Neither one of them is crazy. Their beliefs were just shaped by the different worlds they saw. And that's really the big takeaway here. A financial decision that seems absolutely nuts to you might make perfect sense to someone else. For instance, people wonder why those in lower income groups spend so much more on lottery tickets. It seems irrational, right? But from another point of view, you're not just buying a ticket with bad odds. You're paying a couple of bucks for a tangible dream of a totally different life. A dream that wealthier people might already be living. Now, there's one last piece to this whole puzzle that might just make you feel a lot better about your own struggles with money. We all feel this pressure to be experts, but it's so important to remember just how new this whole game is for every single one of us. To put this in perspective, currency, coins and stuff, has been around for thousands of years. But the modern financial tools we all depend on, they're practically brand new. The 401k, the bedrock of American retirement, wasn't even invented until 1978. The Roth IRA, 1998. Seriously, if the Roth IRA were a person, it would just now be getting established in its career. So the big takeaway here is we need to give ourselves a break. We're not crazy, we're all just newbies at this. We are literally among the first generations in human history expected to manage our own retirements with tools that have barely existed for 50 years. We're all figuring this out as we go. And that leaves us with one last question to chew on. Think about it. What is a financial truth that you hold? Something you believe with absolute certainty? And then ask yourself, is it possible that your truth is really just a reflection of your own unique, personal, and pretty limited history? Thinking about that might just be the best investment you ever make.